All right. Well, hello, good morning, and welcome to the second session in our TrinCon virtual event. Once again, my name is Bobby Haggard, and I'm one of the consultants here at TrendSoft. Again, let's make sure everyone's in the correct session. You've tuned into the session titled Dynamics GP, or I'm sorry, this is Dynamics 365 Business Central, Seamless Migration to Business Central. Make sure I'm in the right session. In this session, Matt's going to be providing a migration guidance as well as tips and tricks on importing your data, a few best practices on successful migration into Business Central for this session. Now, a couple of housekeeping notes before we jump in. Again, we've muted all of our phone lines to try and keep down that background noise. If you have a question, which we absolutely encourage, please use the Q&A feature of the Zoom webinar tool. We have a team managing that, the questions coming in, and we'll be sure to log those and answer those at the end of the presentation. Secondly, if you'd like the presentation slides or the video recording, just drop your email into the Q&A. We'll know what that means, and we'll be sure to provide that to you once it becomes available. Finally, don't forget, at the conclusion of the session, you will receive an evaluation. If you fill out that evaluation by the end of the day, Friday, you'll be automatically registered for a free giveaway, which we'll announce a winner of and send that gift out next week. All right, one little poll question here for us. So let me go ahead and share this poll question for you guys. And the question is your organization planning to move or migrate to the cloud? So first you can say, our Dynamics Nav Business Central is already cloud-based. Great. Awesome. We plan to migrate first half of 2022, first half of next year. We plan to migrate second half of 2022, or we have no plans to move to the cloud. So a few questions coming in or answers coming in. A couple of you are planning to migrate in the first half of the year. That's awesome. We look forward to working with you on that. Some of you are already on Business Central. That's great as well. And then for those of you in the second half of the year, we plan to really excited to move that with you as well. And then the other good news, for those of you not planning to move to the cloud, it's not a requirement, not anything that you have to do right away or anything like that. So that's great to have as well. So thank you for that. We'll go ahead and end that poll for now. All right, let's quickly hit on our agenda here for TrinCon event. If you missed our first session that just wrapped up a few moments ago, that was all about Dynamics GP, options of moving to the cloud, and even a possible migration to BC that we talked about. If you missed that session and you think it may be of interest to you, please visit our website. We will be posting these video recordings here in the coming days and weeks once we get those edited, and we'll get those put up there as well. Here at 11, again, Matt Wood's going to provide us a review of Business Central, where our team will talk about migrating Business Central into the cloud. At noon, we'll hear from Jeremy Pritchard on the TrendDocs team, where he will review their TrendForm solution and will review benefits of automating beyond Dynamics. And then finally at 1, Nicholas Jackson will be diving into Power BI and how to use that powerful visualization tool, powerful visualization and reporting tool to help with financial reporting. So if you haven't had a chance to register for any of these upcoming sessions, please just go to trendsoft.com, click on that TrendCon virtual event icon, and register for those additional sessions. If you're not able to meet one of those sessions or attend, we are going to be posting those recordings and happy to share the presentations as needed. All right. Quick speaker introduction here. I think most of you know Matt Wood, but Matt Wood is our Director of Dynamics. He's been working with our Dynamics team for nearly 11 years and has lots of experience with all things Dynamics, including GP, NAV, Business Central, PHP Plus, and Power BI. So at this time, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Matt, and Matt, let you take it away.
All right, thank you, everybody. This is seamless migration to Dynamics 365 Business Central. My name is Matt Wood. I'm the Director of Dynamics here at TrendSoft. So let's get into the agenda here for today. So first of all, we'll first talk about what is Business Central. Obviously, if we're migrating to it, we need to have an understanding of what we are going to. We will talk about the licensing for Business Central. So it's a little bit different than your on-prem Dynamics software. So we'll talk about that a little bit. We will talk about some pre-migration tips, some migration methodology, and then we'll talk about a few tools that we can use. So there are some out-of-the-box Business Central tools, as well as a rapid start tool that we can use as well. So we'll start with what is Business Central. So it was formerly Dynamics Nav. So if you're currently running Dynamics Nav on-prem, or you've heard of Dynamics Nav, Business Central is the same piece of software. Now it's been modernized so that we can run it in a web client type, but the back end, the plumbing, you might say, is the same as Dynamics Nav. It's just basically been rebranded to be called Business Central. Now, Business Central can be cloud hosted, which cloud hosted means it's hosted by Microsoft in Azure. You or your IT or us, we don't manage the databases in the back end. There's no server to keep up. There's not even an Azure server that we're going to have access to that we can control. So it's all managed. The back end is all managed by Microsoft in the cloud hosted, and I connect to that through a web interface. There's also on-premise for Business Central, so the newer versions still do have on-premise if you would prefer to be on-prem. That model is similar to what you have today, where you have a database server, you're going to have an application server, a web server that you're running that information on. Now, even on-prem or cloud hosted, everything's run through a web client only. So you're only going to have, you can see here, if we look over here, we've got a browser, whether this is Edge, Chrome, Firefox. We're running our system inside of this browser, which is regardless if I'm on-prem or cloud hosted, I'm doing that. And that means I can access this system anywhere that I have access to the internet. Now, on the on-prem, there is some additional configuration to have this available outside of your network, but that can be handled by us or your IT team using a SSL cert. In addition to the web client only, it is also a named user license model. So with your current version of on-prem Dynamics, GP, or Nav, you're using what's called a concurrent license model. Concurrent means I could have 40 users set up in the system. I might have 30 licenses that I've purchased. As long as only 30 of those users are in the system at the same time, I'm good. I won't get any issues. The named user license model is different. It is going to be a per user per month price, and that means that I'm only going to have I have to set a user up and they're named to that user. So in that same example where I had 30 users that were getting it at the same time, but I had 40 set up, in the Business Central world, I would have 40 named user licenses that I'm using. The good news there is a lot of you guys that are current on your enhancements can use a promotion from Microsoft that's going to help you bridge that gap between the concurrent and the named user. And we can, Tara and Bobby, know when those promotions are going on and can help you with those. A lot of you may have taken advantage of them already. All right, so as I mentioned, it's web client only, and we're going to go look at that here in a minute. But that does mean there's no installs to be done on individual workstations. So even if you're on-prem, your only installs would be up at the server level. Everybody else would access it through a web browser. All right, so next up is this system is easily customizable. So if you're using GP, you know how hard that can be to customize. You're usually going to have a third-party ISV to extend the functionality of GP. If you're using Nav, you know that it is customizable now. Same is true with Business Central. The difference is in Business Central, we use what's called an extension model versus on the on-prem Nav, the old versions of Nav, you are using a object-based development where I'm potentially going in and customizing native code to make it do things that I want. So the extension model is still easy to do. It's still easy to make customizations to the system. We have a team of developers that do it all the time. And those customizations extend functionality. They don't particularly change the native code like you did in the old versions. So think of it almost like I've got an app on my phone. I load that app. It's not changing the operating system of the phone. It's not making changes to the phone. It's just extending the functionality of my phone, giving me the ability to play a game or access my bank or whatever that is. That additional functionality is added. Same idea here. We're loading an extension to the system, and then that extension extends the functionality of Business Central. And the good news is this makes upgrades a lot easier. So, whereas in the past, and some of you may know, upgrades could be expensive, especially if you had a lot of customizations to your system, because not only are we upgrading you to a new version, we also have to make sure that all the customizations get merged into those native objects. Well, with the extensions, we don't have to do that. So, in the cloud hosted world, your updates will happen automatically. There's nothing for even us to do except to schedule them with the schedule. So they'll get updated by Microsoft, and those extensions then move along with the new version. And you get all the new features, any fix that might need to be added. Those are going to happen typically on a 3 to 4 time a year time frame. So you're going to get lots of updates throughout the year in that cloud hosted version. Now, in the on-premise world, it's still easier to upgrade. It's not as simple as the cloud hosted, yeah, because there is still work to be done on merging the native objects. But it's much, much more cost effective because I'm now just removing my extensions, loading the new version of the system, running the upgrade to get the data up there, and then loading my extensions back on top. So the flow of where, if you're on nav, you may have upgraded every 3 years, maybe two, and you just didn't do it because it was expensive to do. That's going to be different here with Business Central. So you're going to be able to upgrade that system much more often and frequent, even on an on-prem. Next, strong supply chain and manufacturing modules. So this one, if you're on nav, you obviously know that. If you're running GP or QuickBooks, we'll talk about QuickBooks here in a minute. This system is going to give you a little bit more robust functionality in those two modules. So with GP, even QuickBooks, if you're running inventory and you're just doing purchase orders or sales orders, buying something and then selling it right back out, those handle that just fine. Where they get a little more dicey is when I have production orders, bombs, routes. I want to do planning to MRP, whatever that may be. That becomes more difficult in those systems. Business Central, much more robust bomb, route, production order, planning mechanisms, and a little bit more easier to use than I think in GP and QuickBooks. Lastly, here before we go take a look quickly at the system is simplified integration. So the Business Central has a robust API system right out of the box where we can push and pull data from different systems, and the ability to customize those APIs if I have custom things that I need to push and pull, as well as the ability to still do file drops. So I can still create imports using a file drop. If I've got a payroll file I need to load and create a GL entry, that's still all available, but just with some additional functionality on the API side. All right, so let's just go we're not going to do, this isn't about how to use Business Central or anything like that, but I do want to show the system just so you can see it. So you can see I'm just on a web browser. I got other web things open, and I'm inside Edge in this case, and I've got Business Central running here. You can see it's a role center. So if you're on nav 2013 or later, this should look pretty similar to what you have today. I've got some insights that I can see, and then I've got my queues here to see what's going on. So if I wanted to see, here's all my sales invoices that I need to post. Here they all are. I can just click and I go right to that. I can come back quickly out here. I can see, okay, here's all my purchase orders, and I've got that list there. Also, just for our nav folks here, if I click on this, you can see this purchase order. It's going to look very similar to what you're running nowadays. Fast tabs with all your information, my line section, and then additional fast tabs. So just to prove to illustrate it, you can see this system, it's nav, it's just rebranded to Business Central in a web client interface. Nice feature-rich integrations with Office. So let's just go back to our sales orders. I'll open an Excel. And you can see I can open that up quickly. If you're a GP customer, these lists, they're all over the place in this system. similar to what your smart list you use in GP. All right, let's pop back over here. All right, so let's talk about licensing. We've seen the system. So there's actually 4 types of licensing for this. I'll talk about the 3 in the graphic here, and then there's an additional one I'll mention as well. So first one is the Essentials license. So 365 Business Central Essentials. This one runs $70 per user per month. And of course, this could, depending on what promotion, if you're coming off GP or NAV, this could be a different number. But this is, if you're just buying it brand new, $70 per user per month. This is going to include all of your modules inside of Business Central except for manufacturing and service. So if you're not doing any manufacturing or you're not doing any service, you can use this $70 per month. It's going to include everything that you need out there. Next one is the 365 Business Central Premium license. So this one runs $100 per user per month, gives you everything the Essentials does, plus the added features with manufacturing and service. So you're going to get those features as well. Next one, Team Member. That's $8 per user per month. This is a read-only license. So this license will be used for potentially like a C-level employee who only needs to see reporting. Doesn't actually do any transactions, but they do reporting. Maybe a sales team member that needs to be able to get in and see things, see pricing, see orders, see customer history, but they don't particularly need to enter anything. That's what a team member would be. And then the 4th one that's not on here, our graphic here, is called a device license. So the device license is $40 per user per month. And that device license is a way for users that do specific tasks. Think of a point of sale user, someone that's just doing straight point of sale work. Or it could be someone maybe out in the warehouse who is doing, a receipt, a movement, a shipment, but that's all they really do. Those can use a device license. And the device license actually are concurrent. So if you need, let's say I've got 10 employees that work in the warehouse, 5 on first shift, 5 on second shift. I would only need 5 device licenses for that because I'd have 5 users in during the day and then I'd have 5 users in at night. They don't have to be particularly named that way. They can just go in and out using that device license. All right, so that's our licensing. Let's now get into some migration. So this mostly webinar, we're going to talk about, all right, I've decided I'm ready to move off GP, or I'm ready to move from NAV on-prem. I'm ready to go to the cloud. So some of these tips are good for if you're moving to any system, regardless if you're coming to Business Central or not. And some of these, as we move, we'll get into the more specific things regarding Business Central. So first of all, anytime we're doing a migration from one system to another, these tips are useful. So first of all, we want to simplify the chart of accounts. So we may have been using, let's just say we've been using GP for 10 years. I've had lots of accounts, lots of segments. And over time, some of those I've blocked 30% of those accounts. I don't use them anymore. Well, this is the perfect time to simplify that chart. Rather than bringing every single thing over from my current system and setting those up and then still having those 30% of accounts I never use, this is the time to pull those accounts out, remove the ones I don't need, and bring in a nice fresh chart of accounts. Also, like if you needed to combine accounts, it's hard to do that when I'm trying to do that through a journal entry. But this is a good time to do that because I can create mapping files that say, okay, the balance from account number 123 needs to go to account 1234. And I can move those balances through a mapping file. So when I bring them in, now I've got them all in the right spot. So perfect time, sit down, look at the chart of accounts, analyze it, decide how can I simplify this and make it better for my business. Next, we want to clean old master records. So when we talk about master records, we're talking about, for example, customers, vendors, fixed assets, inventory. Again, perfect time, purge out some of that stuff you're not using anymore. For customers, maybe you say, well, if I haven't sold to them in the last 5 years, then I'm not going to bring them into the new system. For vendors, maybe say if I haven't paid a vendor in 2 years, I'm not going to bring it into the new system. Fixed assets, we're going to get rid of everything that's fully depreciated. We don't need that mucking up our list in the new system. Inventory, same idea. I haven't sold this item in 5 years. I haven't used it. Let's not bring it in and make my list longer than it needs to be. So because I'm already pulling that out and then pushing it back in, this is the perfect time to clean it up. So we want to clean old master records. Third on the list here, clear open balances if possible. So this one is when I do a cutover, I'm going to bring in open AP, I'm going to bring in open AR, I've got to bring in outstanding checks. So anything in those open balances that I can go ahead and clear. AP is the best example here because I usually can control what I pay. But I want to go ahead and pay as much as I can at that cutover date. That way, I'm not having a lot of data to move, and it's easier to reconcile when I get into the new system that I've got what I had in my old system matches what I have in my new. So we want to clear any open balances if we can, make a plan for that. Can we pay things off a little sooner than we might have otherwise? And then finally, on our pre-migration tips, have a plan for historical records. So when we switch to any system, it doesn't have to be Business Central. I could be going to any system, or you could be coming to my system, to Business Central, maybe not from GP, but something else, QuickBooks, whatever it may be. You're coming into Business Central. Well, we want to have a plan for historical records because we're going to bring master records and we're going to bring open balances over. But when we start talking about bringing AR subledger, for example, or we want to bring all our sales orders in, well, that becomes more difficult because to bring in an open sales order with inventory items on it, we've got to run through that whole process to get it into the correct tables that we want it. So that becomes expensive to do that. So a lot of times we're not going to bring those into our subledger table. So we need to have a plan for that. So a couple thoughts there. Can we keep our existing legacy system open, available for users for a year or two so they can go back and reference that and we can use it for reporting? Once we've gone through a year or two in the new system, we've got data there now that we can use. Can we take a database backup of what we've got out there, install that on maybe an Azure environment so that if we need to go back and reference it or we need to use it for reporting, we can go out there and grab it? Or can we take the historical tables and we dump them into a Business Central custom table? Can we take that sales order table, dump it into Business Central, and have that available to view later? So we want to have a plan for that. So there's some options there. Because as I said, to bring it into the native tables and make that work, it's usually going to be a pretty expensive proposition. All right, next is our migration methodology. So just some things that over my last 10 years kind of working with data and moving data, some things that we want to think about. So number one, we want to perform the master record migration twice. And there's reasons for this, and it depends too on the tool we're going to end up using. For example, if you were to use the GP migration tool, that actually will refresh as you add things. So we don't really have to do the migration twice. It just kind of brings data in. But let's say we don't use that tool where we've got a lot of data to clean and it's just not going to work out for us. We got to use Rapid Start to bring in our data to Business Central. So we want to do this twice, and there's reasons for that. Number one, we want to make sure we're not going to run into issues when we try to bring data in. Is there something about our data in our legacy system that's going to make it hard to bring it into the new system that we're going to need to clean? We want to find that early so that we're not at the time of go live and realizing, oh no, we got all these special characters we've got to clean out of our files. And then number two, and I think more important, is we want to be able to train with our data in our system, in our new system. So when we move our data into Business Central, we're going to want to train on that, on how to do transactions. It's different than GP, for example, or different than QuickBooks. We don't want to use sample data because, a customer that doesn't mean anything to me or an inventory item that doesn't make sense isn't going to help us with training. It's going to really bog our brain down and say, oh, well, I'm making a bicycle. I never do that, for example. So we want to bring those master records in so that when we do training, everything makes sense to everybody and they can see, okay, yeah, I know this customer, I know this part, this is how we do it. So that's the other reason we want to perform that twice. So we'll do it once at the very beginning so that we have practice and then for training. And then we're going to do it again at the end, and we're going to either choose that we say, okay, on November the 16th, we took our first snapshot. So we need to know all the records we added since then. Or we may just say, we're going to do a full migration again and just pull all the data out and bring it in. So that's number one. We want to do master record migration twice. We're also going to plan for our cutoff dates. So as we get close to the time that we're going to cut from one system into Business Central, we want to have a plan for those cutoff dates. So what that means is, let's say we know it's going to take us about a week to grab all the master records and bring them in to the new system right around that go live time. So we want to set that cutoff date a week before, and we want to let everyone on our team know, hey, if you add a new vendor after the 11/16, you're going to have to go key it into Business Central too. And we want to set that expectation for everybody. So when we get into the new system, they know, oh yeah, I got to go add this after this date. So we're going to plan those cutoff dates. Next, open balance migration. So we talked a little bit about that before. But again, this one's going to happen right around go live. So we don't want to do this one early. We want to do this one right at cutover. And you're going to basically run a trial balance out of one system and say, all right, here's all my open AP. And then we're going to bring that data into Business Central in detail. So when we go to cut our checks in Business Central, we can cut those checks and make those payments. Same with AR, open outstanding checks, deposits in transit, fixed assets, all those open balances, inventory numbers we need to bring over. And we want to make a list of, here's everything that we potentially might need to do at the time of cutover. Also, we want to plan for some downtime here. So we know when we make the switch, there's a lot of data, a lot of moving parts. So we need to think through that as we get close to the go live and decide, all right, are we going to need to take 3 days? Do we need to take 5? Can we do it over a weekend where we don't have any downtime? We need to plan for that. We also, because we know there could be downtime, we don't want to plan a cutover, a go live during a busy time for your business. So if it's a busy, maybe you're in retail and after thanks, leading up to Black Friday and to Christmas, that's a busy time. We don't want to do any cutovers during that time. Maybe we got to do quarter end closes every year, and we don't want to have a cutover at a quarter end because we don't want to be fighting the system at an already stressful and busy time. So we got to plan for that, plan those dates out, and decide what's the best for that. Next, as we do that open balance migration, we want to review our balances after the cutover, and we want to do it quickly. So as soon as we get the open balances moved over, we're going to want to run some reports to A, verify what we brought over matched what was in the current system, and B, what we brought in matches our GL. We don't want to find this a month later and realize, oh no, we were out of balance at cutover. That leads to a lot more transactions to deal with, a lot more reconciling issues. We also want to make sure we got everything in, because in 2 weeks, if a vendor emails me and says, hey, you haven't paid me, and I realize, oh shoot, I forgot one of those transactions, that's why we want to review it early. We want to catch it early so that we don't have to fight those issues down the road. We're going to have enough going on with a new system as it is. Finally, we want to test, and we want to test some more. So we want to, once we get these master records in and we start doing these transactions, we want to do a lot of testing. So we want to test early, we want to test often, we want to find the issues as early in the process as possible so that we can address those and fix those. We know it's going to be stressful at go live. There's no way around it. It's always going to be stressful. So we want to make sure we've caught everything that we can potentially catch before that go live. So we want to take a handful of transactions, every possibility that we can think of that we do in our current system, whether that's GP, NAV, QuickBooks, and we want to come over and we're going to do the same transactions in Business Central so we can catch any issues. Maybe there was a report that I ran at when I did a pick ticket. I need to make sure I have that report. We want to catch all that information early, often, not late and often. All right. Okay. So those are migration tips. So now we're ready. We've planned. We're ready. We're moving. In this case, we're moving GP over into Business Central. So a couple things. There is a tool for migration from GP to Business Central. This tool it's pretty good. It will bring over some data, not all data. And depending on how much we need to clean, we may decide we don't want to use this tool at all. But it's a tool there, and it's a good starting point. it's probably going to get us 70-75% of the way there with this tool. Now, there's a couple requirements that we have to have, and if we don't meet these requirements, then we're probably looking at doing it manually anyway. So number one, we've got to be on SQL Server 2016 or later. So if we're on an older version of SQL than that, this tool will not work. We also have to be on Dynamics GP 2015 or later. So again, anything earlier than 2015, we can't use this tool. Databases can be up to 80 gigs. Now that's a big database in GP. I've seen a few that are that big, but typically that's going to cover everybody. But if your database is over 80 gigabytes, it's not going to work either. So you'd have to look at another option. Now, what will this tool bring over? So it's going to bring my chart of accounts. It's going to bring my vendors, my customers, my inventory items, and my checkbooks. So those are the master records it's going to bring over. It's also going to bring in open balances. So it's going to bring in the open transactions for my customer and my vendors. And then it's going to bring on-hand inventory balances as of the date I run this. So it's going to bring in those on-hand balances. Finally, it will bring in historical receivables transactions, payables transactions, and inventory transactions. Now, these transactions in these particular, those three, they're going to go into a table inside of Business Central, not the normal table that like a sales transaction would hit if I post it in BC. It's strictly for reporting purposes, so that if I wanted to go back and see sales based off how much I sold these customers in that time frame, I would be able to run a report and see that, or reference if somebody asked who paid me, what check did this invoice pay. I could figure those things out and look them up, but they're not going to be in my normal tables. I'd have to go look in the inventory transaction tables. So that's the tool. If you want more information on it, I've put a link here on my slide. You can click that. It'll take you out and actually will walk you through all the requirements as far as what information you got to key into the tool, what kind of permissions do you potentially need for your current SQL and what you need in Business Central. Now this tool, I will mention, the partner license, our license, we cannot run this tool. So it is something we would do in conjunction with you. We would work with you to log in as your user and run this tool. All right, so then the other tools we've got is for nav. So nav we can do, again, you have to be on SQL Server 2016 or later and version 14 or later. Now, with nav, it's similar to what an upgrade has been for you in the past. So you're going to have to upgrade your system to at least version 14. You also have to convert any modifications that you have to extensions. So it's going to act similar to an upgrade. Now, the good news is where we had that limited data set of data we can bring in through GP, with nav, we can bring all the data over. It's just going to act just like an upgrade. So if you think about if you've done an upgrade in the past and what that kind of costs, that's going to be a similar process. Now, if you have a lot of customizations, so if I've got a lot of custom objects, then what we might want to consider doing is a re-implementation where we say, okay, we're just going to take the customizations we need, load them into Business Central, and then we'll go grab the data that we need and bring it in to the system. The good news is with the tools that we have, even for manual moving of data, because the tables are going to pretty much mirror each other, it's a pretty quick process of just pulling data, putting it in a template, and then pushing it back in. But that's what we've got to think about. A lot of customization, and you may want to consider doing a re-implementation. If you're already on the extension model or you're light on your customizations, then you could look at just doing a full upgrade and taking it right to the cloud that way. All right, one more tool that I'll mention here, and then we're actually going to get in and look at a fourth tool. So there's also a tool to migrate from QuickBooks Online. So again, you have to be on QuickBooks Online. You cannot be using like an on-prem QuickBooks version. It has to be an online version. And this tool will bring over, similar to GP, it's going to bring customers, vendors, items, chart of accounts, beginning balance transactions for your general ledger, on-hand quantities for inventory items, and then open documents for customers and vendors. So it's going to bring us master records, some of the open balances, and this tool will bring it in. Now, in my experience with this particular tool, We had to do a little bit of cleanup after we did it, but it was nice. So it got us probably, again, 75% of the way there. And then we ended up using this tool I'm going to show you next to actually do some of the cleanup. All right, so the last one I'm going to talk about is Rapid Search. So this is a tool inside of Business Central. And I'm going to actually come out here and show you that. And what you use is this thing called configuration packages. So what this tool does is it gives me the ability to import data into any table inside of Business Central. So the one I'm going to show today, just for simplicity, is we're going to look at like the chart of accounts. So I'm going to click new here and create a brand new package. And we're going to go call it, let's just call it COA, chart of accounts. All right, so we give it a name, we give it a code, a package. And now we got to tell it which table am I wanting to import or export data out. So this works both ways. I can import and export. So table ID. Now, of course, if you're new to this, you're probably not going to know the tables, but I can click on this. I can get a full list and I can start to search. So there we go. GL account. That's what I'm looking for. So I'm going to click that. Say OK. And then that's all I'm going to do. Now, there's some advanced features to this that we can look at. You can see this is telling me there's 42 fields in this table. I can click on this and I can actually exclude or include certain tables. But for our example today, or certain fields, I'm going to just pull the whole table out. Now in this scenario, I've already brought in some records. So I've brought in 83 records. So when I export this out, it's also going to export those 83 so I can use it. In general, what I would suggest doing, anytime I'm doing one of these packages, if I'm starting from scratch, I have no data in the system yet, I would go key a record manually. So I would just go out, let's say I'm doing vendors. I would go out, I'd key a vendor, just how I would know it would work. I might even run a couple transactions to make sure that it's going to work first. Then I would come into my configuration package and export this out. That way I've got a nice template. I've got one there, one record that I know works, and it's there, and I can use that for the rest of my transactions. All right, so once I've created my package, I've told it which table I want to use. And again, I can actually do multiple tables and it would pull them out in separate tabs. But for today's example, let's just do one. I'm going to click package here and I'm going to tell it to export to Excel. So it's going to actually take all 83 records that are in the database and export those out to Excel and give me a nice template to import some more records. So I'm going to say yes. Okay, so we'd open it up over here in Excel. All right, so here it is. And we can see here are all my accounts. So I've got a checking account, a savings account, petty cash, and whatnot. Now, in my example here, I want to add a couple new cash accounts. So I don't have to worry about all these other accounts because I'm not updating anything on them. So I'm just going to delete these and just use this as my template. I had to hit enable editing, so we're going to have to delete those. Okay. And I don't really care about these ones at the top either because I'm mimicking this account here. All right, so I know I've got a new cash account, and I'm going to give this one 10-101. And we're going to call this checking new. And you can see, I can see just from above, okay, this one's a posting. I need to match that. All right, it's an asset, so I'm going to match that. It's a balance sheet, so I'm going to match that. It's a debit balance. All right, false, yep. Okay, these are, now I'm starting to notice these all kind of match. So I'm going to select all of these and copy that down. Last dates, I don't worry about. All right, here's another field I might need to move down. And then, a little too far there. And then, okay, all these are the same too, so we're going to just copy these down too. So I've got this nice template, and I could continue to go, and I could add additional accounts here too. But I really just need to bring in this one account for my example today. But again, if I'm starting from scratch, I'd enter that one account. Okay, that's right. And then I just key in right from Excel or copy and paste from my existing file. Now I've got a template to load this. So I'm going to save that, close that down, and we'll come back out here to my package. So I'm back out here in Business Central. This time, instead of export, I'm going to import. So I'm going to import from Excel, and we're going to tell it which file do we want, which is this one here. Yep, we're going to say import. And it brought those package records in. Now notice, this was 0 before, this is now 2. And what's pretty cool about this is I can click on this link and I can see here are my records that I'm bringing in. So there's that one I just added, checking new, and I can scroll through here and see all the data. Now, another pretty cool thing. If there was a problem, oh, checking new is not what I meant to call it checking new chase. I could add that to the right here inside the system. I don't have to go back out to my template. And that looks good to me now, so I'm going to say okay. I'll come up here to process, and I'm going to apply this package. So now what I'm telling it, nothing is actually in the native tables yet, or into the actual tables. I'm still in this temp table that I imported into. I'm going to apply this package, say yes. And you can see I've inserted one record. I did have that additional one in there, modified. We didn't make any changes to it. So now I've inserted a record. You'll notice over here my database is showing 84. And then let's actually go look at my chart of accounts now. There we go, checking new chase. So I brought that in through an import, and it worked great. Now, of course, this was one account. I would have just keyed that if I really only needed to do one. But when I'm talking about 1,000 accounts, you can see how much useful that is to have that template and use it. A lot of times, even on our GP migrations we've done, we actually go with the rapid start because we know GP very well. We know NAV very well. We've actually just recently done a NAV to BC migration. We know all those tables very well, so it's easy for us to go grab it, put in rapid start, and push it in. And we can do all the cleanup in Excel rather than once it gets into BC having to do the cleanup. All right, so that's the rapid start tool. That is kind of our options for those migrations. So I'm giving you some tips, showing you a couple tools you can use. And then if you have questions, we can take those now. Thank you.
All right. Well, great. Thanks again, Matt, for that great information regarding the seamless migration with Business Central. We now have a few minutes for questions. So again, our team has been monitoring the Q&A. If you have a question, go ahead and drop that into the Q&A. We'll be sure and get that answered. As we've said before, if your question is more specific to your group, your organization, just reach out to us directly. I'll put my contact information up here in a minute, or if you have any of our TrinCon consultants information, just reach out to us. We'll be happy to address those as we go. All right, so Matt is on here with us. Matt, I did have two kind of questions that came in along the way. One is, how long does a typical migration from GP to Business Central take? I'm sure that's a bit of a dicey question because no GP installation is the same, but if you could put some rough kind of estimates around that, that'd be great.
Yeah, so I think a typical project for us, I think at the fastest we can go without a lot of history, probably 30 to 60 days. And then typically a project is probably going to run around 90 days or more, depending on complexity, modifications needed, and things like that.
Perfect. All right. Great. Thank you. And just as a reminder for anyone who is wanting the reporting or the presentation slides, just drop your email into the Q&A. We'll know exactly what that means as well. We'll get that sent over to you. Matt, you had mentioned this earlier in the presentation about planning for historical records. What are kind of the options on migrating historical records into BC?
Yeah, so there are tables specifically talking about GP that will store some historical data. It's typically just going to be AP, AR, that kind of data. In general, moving historical records into the actual tables in BC, it's possible. It's going to be a little more expensive just because you have to basically create the transaction, apply payments against it, and you have to do all that within the system. So if you have a lot of history, obviously that can take some time. The other option is to just create custom tables inside of BC, and we can dump the data in there for reporting purposes. And then lastly, you could keep it in a legacy database and again, try to report on that using a Power BI type tool where we're going to pull that data together and mix it in with the BC data.
Perfect. Okay, great. Any other questions? I see some people dropping their emails into the Q&A. We'll get that sent over to you. If you have a question about CPE, we'll absolutely get those certifications sent out following this as well for those of you who have requested that for their needs. All right, Matt, doesn't look like there's any other questions at this time. Thank you for the presentation. Thanks for answering these questions. For those of you on the session still, a few little bits of homework or next steps or to-dos for you. First, be sure to complete that session evaluation prior to the end of Friday so that you're entered into the drawing for our giveaway. Secondly, if you haven't already done so, go to trendsoft.com, register for those additional sessions on trend forms coming up here in 10 or 15 minutes, and then Power BI session at 1. And then thirdly, if you do have questions or if support needs come up, please reach out, let us know. As I've mentioned, our technical team is ready to engage and help out where needed to help your organization be more efficient, add some automation or provide assistance where needed. And then finally, give us a like, give us a follow on any of the social media platforms. On Twitter at TrendSoft or on Facebook, LinkedIn, we're on there as well. And then finally, visit our website regularly, trendsoft.com. We have a blog where we are continually pushing out updates, content, and information as well. So please feel free to bookmark those and be a frequent visitor. All right, with that, I don't see any other questions or any other comments coming in. Certainly want to thank you for attending today's Business Central migration session. Again, on behalf of our TrendSoft team, thanks to our clients in attendance, taking the time out of your busy day. We know there's a lot going on. Thank you guys for being in attendance, and we look forward to continuing to partner with each of you in the future. Thanks again. Have a great day.